Hi everyone, welcome to Product Tank New Zealand this time. We're actually doing something a little bit different today. We're actually doing a simultaneous broadcast from, we have people in Wellington, we have people in Auckland, and we have speakers from across the country. So we're making it very difficult for ourselves to get this working, but I'm sure all the technology won't fail us and everything's going to be great. And so just to prove that I'm not lying, so to prove that I'm not lying here, we've got feeds coming in from different parts of the country here. We're desperately trying to get everyone set up. Now, what's interesting is that they're 20 seconds delayed. So what I'm saying now, they're not going to see in live for 20 seconds. But we've got David's iPhone there with people up in Auckland. And we've got iPad down there, which is going to be for the people down in Wellington at Trade Me. So it's great to have a live audience building. All of our speakers, though, are sitting at home or in the office. I don't know where they are, but they're all sitting around the country waiting to come in. We've got Kevin from Dunedin. We've got Susie, who's calling in from Christchurch. We've got Jess from Nelson. We've got Hely from Heslop North and Tim from Tauranga. So we've got a whole range of people who are going to be calling in and having their 10 minutes of lightning talk action. And I wanted to call out that this is actually the first. We started the meetups in Wellington in 2015, and we've done 42. This is our 42nd meetup. And this is the first one that I've not attended in person. So I'm getting a little bit of FOMO from the people in the room who I normally get to mingle with. But today I get to do it from home and from my home office. And I'm really happy that things are going well in location. So I'm going to stop talking and I am going to bring some people in. Before I do, though, the motivation for this session was really to recognize that there's a lot of amazing product thinking and product companies happening across the country, and not just in Wellington and Auckland and Christchurch even. And we tend to, well, certainly I do when I talk to people around the country. A lot of my clients come from Wellington and Auckland, and yet we tend to forget what's happening around the rest of the country. So we wanted to create a space where people could talk about what they've been doing and some of the thinking that they've been doing as product leaders from anywhere but Auckland and Wellington. That was our only criteria. So that's what we've done. We found these people, and they are going to talk to you shortly. And so I am the first person that we're going to bring in is actually from Dunedin. So we're going to go north to south, south to north, and we're going to bring in Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for being our speaker.
Hi, thanks very much. Great to be here.
Yes. And so Kevin works for a company in Dunedin, Nomos One, am I saying
that's
it right?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
But you're based in Aotearoa, and so you're kind of like in Dunedin, but you work out of Aotearoa and then commute to Dunedin every now and then. How does that work for you?
Yeah, essentially we have become pretty much a remote first business, and the whole business is pretty much located across New Zealand and some in Sydney. So yeah, my product team and development team are some of them are in Dunedin, some of them are in Christchurch, some I've got people in Auckland, Tauranga, and yeah, so I go back and forth to the office when necessary, but essentially I don't necessarily need to be anywhere.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, I should probably also, before I get you to do your talk, Kevin, I just want to tell people on the stream that if you type in a comment on the live stream and YouTube comments and live stream, then I'll see it. And at the end of all the talks, we're going to do a Q&A. And so make sure that you pile all the questions you have into the comments on YouTube, and we'll bring as many of those as we can at the end of the show. If you're in one of the locations in Auckland and Wellington, then for you guys, we've got a Slido URL that you can use. So whoever's running your event can tell you what that Slido link is, and from within Slido you can type in your questions there, and we'll also see those and bring them into the stream as well. So save all your questions, put them all in there, and we'll get to them at the end, where we'll bring everyone back to do a bit of a Q&A session at the end. Okay, Kevin, I'm going to bring your deck in here, and we're going to kick off with building a product organization from scratch. So I said I'm going to come back into your stream if you take more than 10 minutes. So I'm the timekeeper, and already over time as we speak. So actually no, we're doing quite well. So we've got plenty of time. So but use your 10 minutes wisely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. So I am going to leave the stream, and I'm going to leave the floor to you, and you have your 10 minutes of fame starting now.
Great, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Doug. So I'm going to kick off quickly, and I'll introduce myself. My name is Kevin Mansfield. I am the Chief Product Officer at Nomos One. We are a B2B SaaS business. We focus in the lease management and accounting space, and I've been with the business nearly 3 years. I'm going to speak today about building a product organization from scratch, and there's a picture of me of a team that I do quite a bit of work with recently, but they don't take any notice of any of my recommendations. So just dive into a bit further into introduction. I've been in product management about 15 years, sometime in big tech businesses, some with startups, some with businesses, somewhere in between. And over that time, I've had the responsibility of building a product org from the start in kind of 3 different businesses. And each time has been different in some way. Example, at Masabi, I was the first person that they hired for a whole sort of a new area of idea that they had, and no team existed at all. On my first day, I was handed a A4 sheet of paper with some boxes and scribbles on it by a couple of the founders, and which kind of outlined their thinking. And that A4 sheet of paper today is a global transit ticketing platform that supports over 100 metro cities across 10 countries. So that worked out okay. Nomos, when I joined, was 5 years old, had a decent customer base, monthly recurring revenue, but was kind of 100% kind of founder CEO led. There was a team of developers, but no real strategy, no real process, and no one leading the product space. But the need had been recognized, so that was a good start. And with Nomos, I actually started this cycle of building the product org twice, such as kind of the boom and bust way a startup can operate sometimes. But through these experiences, I've essentially developed and iterated an approach that I've used a few times, and I thought this might be useful to share. So this is essentially my kind of top 5 areas that I recommend to focus on if you are in such a position of building an org from scratch. Okay, so number 1 is start with a vision. It's probably a good idea to start with a vision no matter what you're doing, but as a product leader, you will have experience of both good and bad environments. And you need to use that to map out your vision of your product org. A blank canvas can be a hard place to start, and having an idea of what good looks like is to refer back to is useful. This vision will need to flex. It shouldn't be too rigid. You'll need to take on board the specifics of the business, and it's definitely not about wheeling out the ceremonies. So I have a format of product development lifecycle that is my kind of starting point for standing up a product org. Starts with a product strategy as the central tenet, and uses a cycle of milestones, activities to continuously identify, understand, deliver, etc. around this core strategy. But coming in to a new business that has none of this in place, you'll need to be prepared for your path forward thereafter to be quite messy, and you're going to need to ruthlessly prioritize. It will take some time to progress this vision to become a reality. You can't move from no structure, maybe no team, to a well-organized, resourced, value-creating machine overnight. And depending on what might already be in place, you're going to need to conduct some sort of audit or review to understand where do you need to focus your attention first. The example is when I arrived at Nomos, as I mentioned, there was no real strategy in place. There was a sales process that kind of focused on agreeing bespoke requests with potential customers, and no real kind of plan for how those things were going to be delivered. Not much customer insight and planning process or decision making. There was a team working on items loosely structured into a work stream, but it was essentially kind of continued firefighting, moving from urgency to urgency and kind of causing problems on the way. So although my vision for my PDLC starts with why and moves through opportunity assessment and discovery and all these things, my focus was to zero in on that development cycle, as the situation was such that if I didn't, I might not get to the point of being able to put a strategy in place and assessing opportunities, never mind that they might create value. And also, you are likely, if you are in this situation, to be initially the sole product person, and you'll need to assess where you're able to, what you're able to do in what time periods, where there's no value in spreading yourself too thin and not achieving the goals that you've set out until you've put maybe a hiring plan in place. The doing part of the plans and the processes that you're putting in place was going to probably be done by you. And so wearing those two hats between leading and doing is quite hard. So you need to prioritize on what you can achieve. Next, collaboration and communication. We're all familiar, I guess, with the Venn diagram, right? And whether you agree with the amount of circles or think there should be more, or that the titles of the circles should be different. The point here is that as the product leader, you are the one that knows the value of alignment. And no singular business discipline can achieve anything without the others, but it's the product leader's job to champion that, otherwise it likely won't happen. Now, when that is not part of a business's DNA, you need again a process or an approach to move this forward. So my starting point or approach here is kind of an adaptation of the product council idea that Marty Kagan talks about in his first Inspired book. But rather than just an exec group, my goal here is to enable cross-functional communication. So I bring together a representative of each area of the business. From that point of view, I like it to be called a council because each member represents and also is responsible for bringing info to and from their individual teams. My current example of this forum happens every 2 weeks and functions through applying kind of a recurring agenda that moves items through our life cycle. And when initiating this, the first purpose is to provide all the areas of the business kind of a forum to come for answers, and structured forums build trust. And if you are transparent and set out your plan, it's like the wider business is going to be patient while you're standing up pieces of your process and understanding why you're standing up pieces of that process. Next is just a picture of Steve Jobs. There's no other reason for it. No, I'm joking. This point is all about great teams build great products. It's probably the most important part in all of this. From the point of view of building a product org and therefore also the team, I'm not just talking about product managers. As a team of product people on their own won't produce a product. Now, I've probably been quite fortunate in the sense of that, and with the couple of businesses that I've built their org from scratch, Masabi and Nomos, I've had the opportunity to kind of assemble the whole PD team, kind of product design, engineers, DevOps, QA, etc. But even if you don't live in a world where you have direct leadership or whatever over those areas, and that's more often than not the case, you need to, as a product leader, partner super closely with your technology partner. You need to partner with all the areas of the business closely, but more so with the technology partner. My CTO and I are virtually joined at the hip. The reason I think this is that, in my experience, empowered teams and the starting together philosophy is the way that teams become great. And just to dig into that a bit further, two things that I really focus on are: one, everyone in the team is responsible and accountable for the outcomes, and two, everyone that I hire must have a broader ability than the specific discipline, the idea of being T-shaped. And I'll dig into that second part a little bit more regarding the hiring, because as a product leader, your ability to hire might be the most important thing that you need to get right, and therefore you need a robust process. And my hire process aims to understand that T-shaped aspect of candidates. So quickly, just to run through it, from product manager's point of view, we do a product thinking case interview. We do a technical interview where the candidate works with a team of developers. We also do then a task presentation to a cross-functional panel. All of this also aims to assess cultural fit. And then from the developer's point of view, we do some similar things. We also do a product thinking on ways of working around, and we also do a technical cultural fit and collaborating with the team's interview. Why? It's kind of my opinion that each specific discipline needs to kind of bleed into each other. The fences and the handoffs need to be removed in order that the empowered teams can thrive. And final point is culture is the great enabler of empowering teams. We often talk about empowerment, but what are some ways of doing it? And a couple of ideas that we've put into place are, one was to really emphasize outcomes over outputs. As I was bringing a new team together, I wanted the group to feel that it was more important to do things well than fast. Maybe the fast bit can come later. So we used the concept of the fixed length development cycle, but varying scope. So essentially, we aren't aiming on producing the same quantity of work per cycle. We're aiming to produce value per cycle. And this enabled engineers to also take ownership where it was relevant and relevant to the problem. And rather than aiming on racing through a backlog, we've aimed at producing value. We've also called, for example, our fixed periods trots instead of sprints, and we removed the idea of velocity. And I think I can hear the Scrum Alliance calling me now. I mentioned the starting together idea, which I don't necessarily think is natural in the world we operate in yet. And as an example, to try and move that forward and progress that, what we have done is put into place the idea that product people aren't the sole owners of stories. For example, stories need to be co-authored between engineers, design design people, product people, and agreed upon. Often, an engineer will create a story and work with a product manager to agree upon it before it's finalized. And this has caused, in some aspects, the clarity of the outcome to need further work, but it's also enabled the whole team to take accountability for the goals per period. And I'm just seeing that I'm coming up to 10 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up. So in summary, my top 5 here are: 1, have a vision, have a view of what good looks like. 2, ruthlessly prioritize. Know you can't do all the things you need to do at once, and know where to focus your attention. Collaboration and communication, put in structured recurring forums in order to discuss and work together. Great teams build great products. Empowered teams starting together. Hiring process is super important. Great culture is a great enabler. Conscious tactics and coaching will likely be needed to progress, and gradually build your org so that culture can spread. That is it. Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Mansfield at Nomos 1. If anyone would like to reach out in any further way. And one final thing is that we are also hiring. So if anyone is interested in talking to me about that, I will put that link in the chat. And this is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a fully remote role. You can conduct this role from your yacht in the Bay of Islands if you wish. So please reach out if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you very much. I realized that in the middle of that stream while you were doing that, I had like a 1-minute sign that I put up on my screen, but then I realized that you wouldn't see it because you're probably just looking at your presentation and your slides. I couldn't give you the 1-minute reminder, so I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that on this live stream. But you did pretty well. You're almost exactly 10 minutes, so you didn't even need reminding. So thank you for keeping to time. We've got some feedback coming in. People seem to like it, and so thank you for putting the effort in to share some things with the group. So I am going to say goodbye. I will bring you back when we do Q&A, and we may have some questions coming through either Slido if you're in Auckland or Wellington, or if you are watching from YouTube. So we've got almost 40 people who are making dinner and watching YouTube at the same time. So if any of them want to put in a comment and question for Kevin, then they should do so in the YouTube comment, and we will get to those at the end. So Kevin, I'm going to say goodbye, and we've got Susie. So Susie's going to come in. So hi, Susie. We're good. It's good to have you here. And hi, Kevin. I'm going to throw you away from the screen right now, Kevin. Sorry, I have to power. Susie, it's all yours now. So welcome to ProductTank New Zealand, and for volunteering to represent Christchurch and some of the thinking that you've been doing. So do you want to do a bit of a quick intro into why you have a non-Kiwi accent? And
yeah. My quick story is I came to New Zealand to travel in September 2019 for 6 months. I've been here for 1.5 years and I haven't left in the country since. So I'm Canadian and did not intend to stay in this country for so long, but absolutely love it. Very, very lucky to be stuck here, and probably have to leave soon because my visa's up soon. So I'm glad I get to do this before my visa's up, but absolutely I love being in New Zealand. I've been in Christchurch for the past 8 months now. and been in New Zealand for over a year and a half.
Awesome. Well, we're glad you got stuck here of all places, right? It could have been a lot worse. And so today you are going to talk for 10 minutes on why or how technical do you need to be as a PM. And so I'm going to give you your full 10 minutes without absorbing it with my voice and face. So I'm going to leave you to it. And I don't know how I'm going to remind you that 10 minutes are almost up. I'm just going to have to assume that you've got really good internal timekeeping. And
I'll try to have my own clock as well, and hope it helps.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I will. I'll see you in 10 minutes. But take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Like I said, my name is Susie. I'm calling here from Christchurch. And I'm really excited to talk about something that I've been struggling a lot with. And this question that's come up many times as a non-technical PM, it's how technical do PM need to be? So I thought this is a really great opportunity to share some of my thoughts around that. So today I'll walk you a little bit through my backgrounds and how I think about the question, how technical PMs should be, some fundamental product engineering concepts, and then like a quick case study, all in 10 minutes. So I'll see how far I can get. So first I'll say that, so my background is like a very early stage startup product person. So when I say early stage, I mean like first 5 employees, finding product market fit, not having great amount of money, very scrappy, but that's the kind of stage I worked with. I used to do a lot more work in the discovery phase in my first few product roles and slowly move into the delivery phase. I started as a non-technical person, so I went to business school, started in marketing, and slowly became much more technical working with engineers without ever having to go to a coding boot camp or anything. So all of this is my opinion around this debate of what I think a lot of people talk about, especially people who want to go to product, is the technical versus non-technical PM debate. And I think it really depends on who you talk to about this answer. So like I said, this is my opinion, sharing some of my learnings in very early stage startups. And my answer to this question is really around being technical enough and understanding what it means and how to think about what it means to be technical enough, especially when you think about the difference between discovery and execution work. So first, how do you think about like how technical you need to be? I think that there's 3 components: your industry, your team, and your role. So specifically on industry and product, I think if you work in a technical industry like AI, or if your product is an API product or it's DevOps, I think you need to be technical because it's very hard to write user stories from a UX user perspective if your entire product is an API. So I think that's the first filter, is around the industry and the product. The second one is around your team. So one, I think Kevin mentioned this as well, is your relationships to your technical counterpart. So are you working with a tech lead, a VP of engineering, basically whoever you're working with on the engineering side, or maybe you're just working with engineers. The seniority of your engineers, so I would say in my experience, the more junior your engineers are, the more technical you need to be because they're not as experienced and don't have amounts of details and best practices. When you work with someone really senior, you don't actually need to be that technical, but because they can translate a lot of that into technical tasks. And just understanding how your engineering team works. Some of them really like technical stories and on like very acceptance criteria, and some of them don't. And lastly is your PM role itself. So are you a product manager versus a project manager versus a product owner? Are you skewed towards more on the discovery, marketing side, on a user side, or a design side, or are you more focused on delivery? So I think these are the 3 components to think about in answering this question for yourself. So why do PMs need to be technical, and why do you need to know some technical concepts? I think the first and foremost is to earn the respect of your developers. You will be working the closest with them. So be able to speak their language, I think is like a really, really important thing, and really help your team work at their best. Because at the end of the day, your job as a PM, I always like to call it that the PM is the conductor in an orchestra. You don't actually play an instrument or make the music. You're there to make sure that music is played beautifully and make sure the work is done beautifully. So being able to earn the respect of your team is, I think, one of the most number 1 important thing. Second is to really understand complexity for implementation trade-off. So in the business context, if people are like, hey, I want to build this feature, it'd be really nice if you can delete, or like, let me just add a sign out button there. You need to understand what the complexity and the trade-offs are. And this is also like ties to the next point, articulating consequences of your product decisions and changes. So when engineers overcomplicate things, because they really like to, how do you help them descope if you don't understand what areas could descope and how they relate to each other? Same when you're like running low on time and trying to meet a launch timeline. When you think about descoping, how do you think about dependencies and the effects of everything else that you're doing from this decision? Everything can look easy, but we always know they always takes time and normally double or triple your estimates. And then really also understanding on this point in an early stage startup, things change all the time. So how do you build things in a modular way where things can be expanded and be flexible, and also understanding when it starts to affect performance and speed and scaling problems. I also think it's as a very early stage PM, you are there to help establish development processes. So, for example, understanding the definition of done, understanding that when you're pushing code, is there testing involved? Is there staging involved? And it's really hard to do that when you have no technical understanding of the development workflow. So be able to understand that and help us establish best practice on development. So these are some of the most, I think, basic components of technical concept. I think that's important for PMs to know, and I'll explain why. There's definitely a bit more, but I just picked the top 4. So I think the first part is understanding the difference between like a basic components of application. I've had friends who are PMs who didn't know the difference between backend and front end. And I think if you're going to build a web product, you should know the difference between a backend and front end, an API and a database, and how they work together. If you're doing mobile, you should understand there's iOS and Android, and what is native, what is hybrid. So I think that's like the most basic components, and just understanding what talent you need to hire for and how things work and who you need to talk to if things break. The second part I think that's really, really important is around anything that affects the user experience. So specifically, I think UX actually has a lot of technical components around loading states, empty states, error states. What are you communicating to the user and why? So the experience I have is when you have a sign-up form, when you just capture, a lot of time if you are capturing this full name, you want to be able to have a first name capture for that you can use for your emails and your welcome email. So just understanding all the data flow, which is the next point, around how the data is used and stored and where it needs to be. And also really important for tracking. So if you're doing any sort of marketing experiments, if you want to know your metrics, you really want to understand how you're tracking and what that flow of data is, and where you're making a decision, what do you call a user versus what do you call a sign up, what do you call a validated user. And last, like I talked about, is really establishing a basic development workflow. Knowing what a PR is, a merge, a push. So for example, when I went into a company, they didn't have staging and they would push everything to prod, which is like not the right best practice. So a non-technical person would not know to have a staging environment. And being able to test and be able to set up automated testing, and just knowing the fact that you need to do some sort of testing and regression testing. Do you have a deployment pipeline? Do you use CI/CD? And just be able to understand general DevOps and how to push a product into production. So I'll just give you a quick case study. In the last product I was working on, it's called ProFlow. It was an HR software for managers to run one-on-one meetings. When I joined, they've already had, my CEO is non-technical, they've already have a version 1. And when I came in, I noticed a few things about that was, you can see that the person writing this was non-technical. So for example, we're using a SendGrid API. The way that it was integrated was on the back end, which meant that every time we want to update any transactional emails, like welcome emails or password confirmation emails, it costs us a dev cycle. The way I would have implemented that would have been through an API and a template ID. So I could change the template in front end using SendGrid's platform versus every time using a backend system and be able to use a dev cycle. Database relationships. I think one of the things that was never clear was like, when did you decide someone is a user? So when you're signing up and you're inviting someone to your team to say, hey, come use this product, it would put everything to a user table. But I can invite Elon Musk to my team, and he's obviously not part of my team, and I don't want to count him as part of my user metric because he's not actually a user. So it's really defining, maybe having the invites table versus putting everything into a user table, people are signing up. And also the database relationship between managers and teams. So what happens when a manager leaves a team? What happens when you belong to more than one team? Because when you're a manager, you can also have another manager and a different report, and none of that was thought through because the person was doing it was non-technical, and that really affected the user experience and the expandability of the product. So I think I'm close to time, but the last thing I'll kind of leave you with is basically, so now I've talked about why do you need to be technical and how do you become technical enough. And this is me as a non-technical person starting out. Is I just ask a lot of questions and talk to my team and talk to my developers and really ask them how things work, and not being afraid to look stupid and just ask lots of questions. I think what's really useful is actually be able to build a small tech product. So even like a website with no code tools. So even if you use Squarespace, you understand that websites are built with containers. You understand dev sections. You understand when you're hyperlinking that you have to specify if it opens a new tab or not. So just being very familiar with some technical products and even no code tools will help you understand the components. I think a lot of PMs can come from, there's like 3 angles people can come from, like from a non-technical perspective. One is the data side, is understanding more of as a BA, like where do your data needs to be? How do you get the data? What are you measuring? How do you know you're measuring engagement? What does engagement actually mean? And how does that tie into the product? Marketing is one where you could track and understand where, like installing a pixel and what does that mean, and when you install Facebook pixel on conversion. And lastly, the design angle, which I think UX is actually a very technical field where if you are really good at design, you can actually get into the technical side of how things work and how things should load. And lastly, it's really one of the things that people should just do a lot more if you're not technical is just QA. When you QA products and you could break down every single component the same way that devs would do unit tests, but if you QA a ton of product, you understand how things are built and how things work. So I think that's about my time. So I'll just leave my contact information here if anybody wants to get in touch.
It's like you have this perfect internal clock. You were like to the second 10 minutes. That was awesome, Susie. Thank you.
Thank you. I was using the timer, not my internal
clock.
You
were? Oh, you were doing, that's good. I like it. You're very very organized then. I love that talk. I love the idea of being technical enough and then exploring what that enough is in your context. So I'm sure we'll have some questions and some thoughts on that at the QA at the end. I'm going to rudely kick you off the stream, and I'm going to bring on our next speaker. So thank you very much for your talk, and we will see you back in the stream for the Q&A at the end. So thanks, Susie.
Thank you.
Okay, hey, before I bring on the next speaker, I just want to remind everybody that if they want to ask some questions, we're going to be doing Q&A at the end of this. If you're watching from the live stream, then you can type in a question into the YouTube comments, and I will see it, and I will bring that back, those questions back in for the group to discuss and talk about when we finish all the talks. And if you're in Auckland or Wellington, then you can use Slido and just talk to Matt if you're in Wellington, and Anthony if you're in Auckland, as to what the Slido link is to be able to post your questions. And those will also appear for me inside YouTube, and I can bring them into the discussions at the end as well. Okay, so our next guest is Jess from Nelson, sunny Nelson. I believe it's the sunniest place in New Zealand. And so welcome, Jess. Good to have you.
Torrential rain today, I'll have you know, Tokes. So
really?
Sunny every day, but the day you want to talk about the sun.
I bet it wasn't 11 degrees though, like it was in Wellington.
Maybe slightly higher.
I have fire on. I have the blow heater on in my study. It's very cold here in Wellington. Hey, Jess, thank you very much for agreeing to join this session. We only really met online recently, and I was impressed that your first experience as a product manager, you've thrown yourself in there, and you're doing it hard by being a remote product manager on day one of your product management experience. And so your topic of leading teams you've never met, it seems very relevant in today's world, right? Like a lot of people are working remotely. In New Zealand, we're pretty lucky, but still an increasing number of companies, even in New Zealand, are distributing themselves around the country and having to work out ways of working together and collaborating. And so I'm really looking forward to your talk. So I'm going to get off, and I'm going to give you, put your screen here. So hopefully you're away to go. And I will see you in exactly 10 minutes. And I hope you keep as good a time as Kevin and Susie did. I don't want to come in here and reprimand you, but I'm sure it'll be perfect and you'll be within the time limit. So away you go, and we'll talk to you again at after you've finished.
Okay, start timer because he's told me to. All right, so like Tokes kind of said, I'm quite new to product, and I think it's probably a good thing because I've only ever done it remote, so I don't know the difference, right? So it doesn't seem overly complicated to me, having never done product where we're all in the same office together. So I work for a company called Beany. I'm the product manager there. And Beany are online accountants for small business, where we deliver traditional accounting service fully online. And we also build our own tech to support small businesses and help them succeed. So Beany is and has always been a fully remote company. It's been around for about 7 years, and currently there's about 35 employees. I've been with the company nearly a year, and like Toke said, I live and work in Nelson. And I've got a wee image of where we're all based. So this is us as of about 3 weeks ago. And since then, we've hired another 4 people in our teams, and 2, I think, are in the far north. And we've also made our first Australia hire because we're expanding later on this year. I joined the company as officially the first product person. And before my hire, product design and implementation was driven by the CEO and the CTO. And since my hire, we've also now brought on board a full-time product designer. The reason the company decided to hire a product manager when they did was simply due to the lack of progress on a new project, which I later learned nearly drove the CEO and the CTO to blows, since now their relationship is a lot better. So I've kind of become the middleman between those two. My perspective on product at Beany is that it is a little bit more complex than like a traditional SaaS model, because accounting is such a service-based industry. So we have the dynamic of software development for one-off pieces of tech, which are for use either by the clients or by our accountants. But we also deliver accounting products, which are obviously delivered by the accountants in a super process-based. So it kind of makes for an interesting model for someone like me to come in and learn, and then the whole fully remote factor too is another piece of the puzzle. So I thought the easiest way to communicate how we operate as a remote company is to talk about things that work well and not so well in the context of an actual project. So the project that I was hired to manage was to take our clients' inland revenue data, what tax they owed and paid, and turn it into something meaningful for both our external clients and our accounting staff, who are often clients of the product team as well. It might not sound very interesting to you guys because it's tax, but it was and it still is pretty radical in the accounting world, because we're actually the first accounting services firm that's got direct data access to inland revenue rather than having to use a third-party provider. So I've structured this for leading our teams that you've never met into the good, the bad, and the ugly or unexpected. So the first thing that works well for us in the good is having clear workflow management and triage system. So probably like many of you, we use Asana for managing our dev workflow and prioritization. So as our tax project got underway and iterations were tested, it actually became really invaluable as a means of coherently grouping our similar issues. We have a large number of IRD numbers linked to us as a tax agent. Each of those numbers has multiple tax types, years, and transactions. So every time we tested a feature, we'd need to look into as many outliers as possible and review their data and record the results coherently grouped together in Asana. And in hindsight as well, it was incredibly valuable because we could then go back and just look at things that were going on and test things that looked a bit funky because we had it really well grouped and clearly recorded. The second thing I've got here is domain knowledge. So I actually chatted to Tokes about this when we first met, and he's told me that it's not necessarily something that a product manager would have, and I don't think it's also necessarily specific to remote teams. But in this instance, having someone in our project who is always available to answer technical questions about tax was super invaluable. Obviously, tax can be incredibly complex, and so there were daily questions from everyone about the ins and outs of how it all worked in a practical sense. Now, because we're remote, if we were having to field those to one of our accounting team and wait for their availability, and of course they're going to prioritize their money-paying clients over the dev and product teams to talk to, then that would have slowed our project down considerably. And as a result, though, of us working on this, a sort of a side thing, our senior dev who headed up the project has become uncomfortably familiar with how tax actually works, to the point that the other week, one of our senior accountants came to him to suggest that maybe the software was broken, and he quietly pointed out that actually she was the one calculating it wrong because he understood how it works better than her. So the third thing I have here with our remote teams is that worked well is the ability to easily do ruthless prioritization. And I was quite pumped that Kevin used a similar term, because now I feel like I'm in the product gang. I've got the lingo. But I call it this because with our project, there were minimal parameters on what we had to deliver. So it was, here's some data, make it useful for clients, and somehow that will add value to our business. It also helped for us too that Inland Revenue and My IR set a reasonably low bar for us to reach. And I do apologise if there is anyone here from Inland Revenue. So given the broad scope, we had to work with a prioritisation being of how many of our clients was each solution actually relevant for. And we needed to make quick and ruthless decisions here because there was just so much we could do. And remote worked really well for this because there actually weren't all the voices in the room on a regular basis. So we were able to really stay focused on the client needs and prioritise those over maybe what the accountants or our internal team thought were important to them. And I do think this would have been much more challenging had we been working closely together in the same space, because it would have been hard to actually focus on what the best decisions for the client were. And I'm sure there is some nifty product prioritization model that someone's developed, but honestly, common sense actually just works well too. So the things that made the biggest impact to the largest group of users were the things that got moved up the list, along with the mission critical things like making sure any calculations our software was doing was actually working correctly. And at the end of the day, the only people that got the slightly shorter end of the stick did end up being our internal accountants, who have had to make do with an admin function that is pretty much just a glorified Excel table with filters. But it works, so that's what I've got. All right, the bad. So this, I'm guessing a lot of people having done COVID remote, this will probably just be common sense to you as well. But for us, the thing that is tough is playing tag. So at one point we got to in the project, we'd made a rational assumption about the data and couldn't find anything anywhere that would back it up. Now, we'd had an online meeting with the dev team at Inland Revenue who'd verbally confirmed our assumption. And then we spent the next 3 weeks trying to get them to check that it was actually correct, and it wasn't. So if we'd both been based in the same town or in the same town as their dev team, it would have been super easy to actually get a face-to-face meeting and sort it out. But unfortunately, because we're all remote, we just had to make do with trying to fit in times in people's calendars and when people had space for video meetings. Because we're all remote in our business, we are treated like adults who can set our own schedules. This does mean if someone has a care appointment, a preschool pickup, or a golfing afternoon, it can play a bit of havoc with getting urgent fixes through. But we do build this into our expectations, and there's give and take in both directions. For most of our team, if they're not at their computers during the 9 to 5 workday, then they're certainly ready to be available, always by phone or answer a quick message pretty quickly. The other thing which is challenging being remote is the time lags. So this can actually be a positive in some instances, I know. Where we have team members offshore, though, sometimes I can find myself waiting and tapping my feet until they're back online. It works well for our senior devs who are reviewing code, and they can do this in the morning in dead time and handing back to the other team members when they come online. But if I have a quick, simple question I need answered by a specific person, then it can actually hold us up on moving on with something. Okay, and on to the last category. Just gonna check my time. How am I going? Oh, speed it up. This is my own personal downfall, communication and methods of communication. As I said earlier, we use Asana a lot, but then I counted up how other means of communication I use in a day, and there's about 10. I won't go through them all now. All the many varied forms of communication can make it super challenging, probably more for the team than me, to always know what the single source of truth is, and it definitely gets worse when we're putting out fires. So for us, the time we made the most headway was when we talked through issues together in a video meeting and tested things in the same space, and then documented what needed to be done using one source, which was Asana. And by sticking to clear communication pathways, we made much more headway rather than me shooting off emails or chats to people like a headless chicken. And the last thing I wanted to talk on, which is not ugly, but kind of unexpected, was the wellbeing aspect. I'm sure a lot of you felt the isolation that COVID brought when you're suddenly trapped at home. But our teams are always at home and they're always remote and they're always by themselves. So it actually gets surfaced even more. And I feel like if you're not together with your team, then you've really got to deeply understand them as people and understand how they're going to react to situations. Some days I don't see everyone, and when things are going down and it feels like everything is breaking, it can be really isolating if you're not together to try and solve the problem. I spoke this week to a team member, and because we've been working together for nearly a year, I kind of know when things aren't good for them. And so it's kind of good for people that are a little bit more reserved, you know, chatting to someone in a video meeting about how you're doing. I actually think people become more honest because it's less confronting than being in the same room as them if you're not the sort of person that would normally open up under situations like that. So to wrap up, we managed to deliver our project and it was well received. The senior dev and I that worked on this together for 3 to 4 months full time are actually yet to meet in person, but I probably have one of the best working relationships with them than I've ever had over my career. And that's it.
That was awesome. Thank you. I love that there was that segue with that connection with ruthless prioritization. We've got some questions about digging into that a little bit more, so you can absolutely feel like you're part of the group. You're one of us now because you understand what ruthless prioritization means, so that's awesome. And I really liked your final point on well-being and how maybe for some people it's a better way to connect at a human level than it might be face-to-face in person or certainly in a group. And so that was a really valuable observation as well. Jess, thank you very much. It's great to have you representing Nelson and Beany, and we will bring you back for sure at the Q&A section at the end of this. And so I'm just getting some messages here coming through. So the rooms are in standing ovation. So we've got some, you probably don't see, I don't know if you see this, there are claps for Jess from here in the room in Auckland, and I'm sure Wellington are doing the same. So so thank you, Jess, again, and we will see you near the end of the show. So I am now going to bring in our fourth speaker. So our fourth speaker is Hely Lopes. He comes from Brazil and is working in Havelock North. So Hely, welcome to our regional lightning talk product tank meetup.
Thank you very much, Tox. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you. So Hely's background is in design. He's been working as a designer for a number of years and has some insights into product from a designer's perspective. And he's going to be talking about the prickly topic of MVP and what that means to him as a designer. And I am going to let you get on with it. I'm going to repeat myself in every interlude. I'm going to say, everyone put your comments into YouTube, whack it into Slido if you're in Auckland or Wellington, and we'll get to those questions at the end. And so with that, I'm going to leave you with Hely. Take it away, Hely.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Hely. I'm a UX UI designer. I have worked as a UX UI designer for over 16 years. I'm originally from Brazil, and currently I'm the head of UI UX at AskYourTeam in Havelock North. So just to start it, I think MVP is a great concept that
Everyone, Hely stopped working. Hely, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. I'm here.
Okay. For a moment, you froze in time. I'm gonna leave again. I don't want you to freeze again. So good luck. All right.
Thank you. So we are talking about MVP or MVC. It's a quite funny concept because there's a different approach. So essentially, if you're a startup and you don't have an end product, so pretty much anything you put out there to collect some feedback going to help you to build a better product. But once you're an established company and you have some foundations, you have a reputation, you can't really deliver MVC to your customers. Okay. From my understanding, an MVP, the simplest definition is the MVP must be the simplest core feature set of any product that allows it to be deployed and absolutely nothing more, right? However, the most popular definition is the smallest thing that we can build that deliver custom values. However, in a daily basis and when we need to deliver stuff, we have some roadmap, I think sometimes we end up forgetting the most important part at this stage. That for me, from a design point of view, it's delivered some customer value since the beginning, since day one. And why is that important? Because when you're going to validate your product, you need to have some engaged customers willing to provide you honest feedback to help you. And if you are not meeting like you're halfway and providing an MVP that it's delivers some customer value for them, not necessarily they're going to be engaged with you from a long run. So it's really important for you to deliver some customer value since the beginning. And I think this is a kind of like a really tricky question, and everybody asks around what is a good MVP? A good MVP from a product point of view, from a design point of view, from a customer point of view. I think a good MVP starts with a good MVP strategy. This picture is well known online. I think it definitely represents exactly what this a good MVP is about. So if it's all about the transport, the concept, so if you just deliver a wheel to your customer, there is no real value on that. But if you deliver something that can make him move, regardless if it's a skateboard, if it's a scooter, or if it's a bike, you start the journey. So it's really important to not to deliver an isolated part of your system, and deliver something that continuously will help your customers to get some value and you getting some feedback and how you can have a design a better product. I think MVP from a design point of view help us to build a slice across these 4 fundamental pillars instead of building just one layer at the time. So I think it's really important because this learning slice will go across the functionality. If you're creating a functional product, if you're creating a reliable, usable, and if you can create some emotional connections through your design as well. So you're going to learn through these 4 pillars and not necessarily one by one. So this is the value from a design point of view I see when you use MVPs. And there's a difference of releasing an MVP and how you can elevate your MVP to an AVP, an exceptional viable product. So the majority of, or as you can see in this chart here, the majority of the MVPs, they are kind of like quite small, and the impact that they're going to cause, it's something in between like good and pathetic. But if you can extend it a bit more, and if you can, like care a bit more about it, I think you can definitely elevate your MVP to an AVP, and you're going to have some more values from that. So an MVP do not have to be an exceptional. An MVP can be something extraordinary that provides some good feedback, that provides some good value for customers. The value in delivering a quality product, not just something that provides a tiny advantage to the user. I think this is how you can deliver more for your customers and get more from your customers as well from a design point of view. And essentially, what I believe it's a good MVP is a working, usable product. It's solid, it delivered customer value from the beginning. And it's known that many companies have failed on the MVP front because of the reductive thinking. So we build the bare minimum functionalities that we can't really get away with, or an incomplete product just to get feedback. But essentially, what is the value if you're providing an incomplete functionality or incomplete product to your customers to get some feedback? If you're in startup, you're like greenfields, this is fantastic. But when you have some customers paying for your software already, you have users willing to engage with your cause and help you to build better products, it's really important if you can start delivering some real customer values since the beginning. And that was me, Kutal. Thank you very much.
Hely, thank you very much. It's an awesome topic in terms of that it just reflects that necessary tension between design and other constraints around technology or business. And I think I'm hoping we can get some good conversations going in terms of what levers do you pull to enable you as a team to invest more in experience, to create, more of those, to invest in more of those layers rather than just getting a thing that works out there. And so
definitely,
I want to thank you for that. We've got some claps in Wellington. We have got some questions coming through as well, so we'll get this coming through, and we will talk more about your concepts later on. So again, thank you very much for
thank you very much.
And I am going to say goodbye to Hely, and I am going to introduce our next speaker, who I believe is ready and lined up. So we have Tim from LawVu up in Tauranga. Tim, welcome to our meetup.
Thank you, Tokes.
It's good to have you here. We haven't met in person. We've talked online a little bit. I've increasingly hearing about LawVu and what you guys are up to. And I know you guys are doing some amazing things and growing really fast. And so it's you're at that point where you're starting to think about how you scale yourselves from being a startup where everyone does everything to how you start to specialize some of the roles in your business to bring on that focus that you need, that experience. So you're going to be talking today about that journey that you've been on, and as your role in the company, probably owning a lot of product and now handing that, some of that at least, over to hire. So it's a really interesting topic, and certainly one that in my business, I'm increasingly encouraging people to hire senior executive level at the front table people in product so that they can contribute at the highest level of a business. And it's great to see you investing in a senior hire at this stage in your business. So well done on that. And
Cheers.
I'm going to leave you with your presentation on the first truly connected software platform for in-house legal teams.
Wow. Sounds better than I could.
Your journey to hire your first VP of product. So take it away.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I am very much not in the category of somebody who has tremendous amount of wisdom to share from a product management perspective. I'm sort of my first at bat as a founder, and product is very much a job that I've sort of took on as necessity, as opposed to having any real sort of experience in that. So rather than sort of try to enliven everybody, I'm just going to tell you about our story and our journey, and hopefully there's something to for you to glean out of that. I'll start by telling you a little bit about LawVu and what we do. When people think about lawyers, they typically think about people working inside of law firms, but our product is built specifically for the 20% of lawyers who work in-house, that work in large corporates, government departments, councils, that kind of thing. They have been woefully underserved, with very, very little changing in terms of what they do and how they work, the ways of working, and the technology that serves them for the last sort of 20 years. They'll be working out of Outlook, and if they're really high performing, they'll be working out of Excel. So we've built a product that is for them. I won't spend too much time on this, but this loosely sort of outlines the platform. For us, our meta management system is the important piece. That is the equivalent of HubSpot's CRM. We want to be the system of record for all things legal in the business, and then we have a range of modules that sit around that. Our story, largely Sam and I met in 2014. Sam had a background in online project management and SaaS. He was really joined the SaaS world in about 2007, so he was there right from the start. And I'd spent about 10 years at the time working inside of law firms as an IT and operations manager. So neither of us were lawyers, and neither of us were engineers either, really. So it's, I don't know, there may or may not be a lesson in there. We met, we aligned around an idea that there was just a better way of doing this, and we built and started to try and sort of kill the idea in 2015. We took a paper product, shopped it around. We built a prototype and got people that were willing to engage with us to tell us what they thought about it. The feedback was great, but we didn't sign our first customers until probably 2016. At the start of 2016, that was enough to get us our first outside money, which was a local angel investor in Tauranga. Later in the year, we signed our second and third customers because we had a product that we felt was sort of probably in that MVC category, but enough to convince one or two people that we had a tool that could solve some problems for them. But we stayed in stealth mode for another 18 months really. After that, right through 2017, we didn't sign a single customer. We figured out, I guess, the failings of the first product that we built. We initially used an offshore team to build V1 of the product, and I'm sure there's plenty of head shaking going on in Wellington and Auckland right now, but we did it and we learned a lot from it, and we knew that in 2017 we needed to go back to square one and rebuild. Sam and I also spent a lot of time sorry, got the cleaner back there aggravating me. Spent a lot of time getting to know our customers better than we did. We went to a lot of conferences and just really sort of try to develop that deep empathy with our customers that we needed. And in 2018, we felt like we had a product that was finally ready to go. And this was literally 4 years, well, sort of three and a half years after we first met and started building the product. We launched because the platform was ready, because lawyers and legal, unlike a sales where they will take anything that they can to try and get some sort of advantage, legal is a cost center, and they're not willing to make those kind of risks on technology. So we knew that we had to be something that had some pedigree, they had to trust us, and that takes time. And we had partnerships with PwC and a whole bunch of other reasons for people to trust us by this time. The big thing was that there was a movement that came along. Legal operations and our legal team started to think about how they could be more efficient, more effective, and we really sort of hit that. Timing is a big part of what we do in startup land, and we got that timing right. 2019, we 10x revenues. We went from 5 to 17 staff, and in 2020. Throughout COVID, despite of not because of COVID, we think we 3x revenue and went from 17 to 50 staff, and so far this year we've added another 20 staff, and we're sort of gearing up to really take on the US in a big way. We've got a bunch of US customers, but we're looking to get over there. The reason this is important is because this is our company journey, but it's also very much a product journey because we are a product company. We're a product-led company. All of our growth has really come from product. We only had one salesperson up until halfway through last year. We've got some numbers here that sort of prove that out. We've, land and expand is very much our model. If you go back to one of the earlier slides, we try to get in with meta management and then expand from there. That net retention revenue number is exciting, and it's certainly one that the VC market's taking note of as we start to talk to them and look at raising a Series A. If I look back on the journey from when we started to where we are today, I certainly think we broke a whole bunch of rules that the grown-ups that have been speaking before me have spoken about in terms of how you should build product responsibly. A lot of what we did was based on instinct, and it was based on empathy and moving quickly, as opposed to having good process and making good data-driven decisions. That was just out of necessity. That's probably the same true for all startups in the early stages. Another point is that we've done it from Tauranga, and people sort of think it's quite amazing at times. I don't get it. Like, we're just doing what we're doing. It doesn't really matter where we are. We could be in Invercargill. It would make no difference. And the final point on this slide, when I'm looking back, is it does, in hindsight, seem like it was a pretty crazy ride. It was unpredictable. But it's certainly been fun to get to this point. This pick certainly sums it up. In some respect, it's certainly been a roller coaster ride full of ups and downs and things moving at breakneck speed. The other reason I like this picture is because you can see that there are people who are having very different experiences while on the same ride. That's me and Sam. Sales team absolutely loving the speed that we're moving at. Features, sales. Client commitments during the sales process, no problem at all. And the poor old CTO up the front here, just having a terrible time thinking, why did I do this? But at the same time, willingly coming along and sort of in the background having a bit of fun. But it's that CTO, it's that the fun's over, I guess is kind of how I think about things at the moment, and that we've been able to move fast up until this point because just we could, but now it's time to bring in the adults and to start thinking about things a bit more differently. Sam and I have racked up a tremendous amount of debt, technical debt over the last sort of 5 or 6 years that it's time to start paying back as we go out and get a Series A and get more resources on board. We need to make sure that we're building on top of a really stable platform. So that is why we've hired a new VP of engineering, and we've also hired a new VP of product. The VP of product is a guy called Hamish Riley. He's ex-Pushpay. His mandate is to build a world-class team, to define world-class processes, to use data, his commercial mindset and intuition to make a whole lot of sensible bets, and certainly to be much more of a diplomat through to the rest of the business and to our customers than I sort of ever was. For me, it's obviously been a pretty touchy time giving up product to a certain extent, but sort of on reflection, now that Hamish is in, he's doing an incredible job. I realise that there's still plenty for me to do. My job is to zoom out. My job is to think about how I can have the most impact in terms of either new products, new features, or new directions and initiatives that sort of feed into our vision, or being able to focus on other parts of the business. I certainly want to spend less time thinking about individual features. I used to get very hot under the collar if a particular form didn't flow in the way that I liked it, but I certainly realise that now that's not my problem, and it's every time we make those mistakes we learn, whereas I just had a very low tolerance for making mistakes before. I'm done prototyping, and I'm certainly done jumping on customer calls where I get to dig very, very deep holes that it's other people's jobs to get us out of, so I'm doing a lot less of that. So in summary, I have no idea actually where time was. I've got a timer sitting here next to me that I didn't press go on. But to summarise the last few years, it's been a huge lot of fun. We've always been making progress. It's never felt like we were doing something that we shouldn't be doing. Just even in those first 3 years when we had no customers and nobody really believed in what we were doing, we knew that this product needed to exist in the world. All that matters, I think, one lesson that we've learned is that all that matters, despite all the rules, despite all these great frameworks, in those early stages at least, and from my perspective as a founder, all that matters is finding product market fit. So long as we're not compromising our customers, so long as our customer stays front of mind in everything that we do, and certainly make the most of those early days when you can do crazy stuff and sort of go on that desperate and urgent search to find product market fit. While you can, because at some point you'll have so many customers that you can't make those kind of wild swings at bat that you used to be able to do. That is me. Like I say, no idea where I'm at in terms of time. We are hiring, so hit us up on the website or hit me up on LinkedIn or something if it sounds like LawVu is the kind of place that you might want to end up at. Over to you, Tokes. Cheers.
Awesome, Tim. Thank you very much. I've got lots of questions for you in terms of how it feels to be a founder giving up some of the reins, and I'm hoping we can get some of that at the end. So I'm gonna bring in the other members of the talks, and so do your hair, make sure you look presentable. Yep, you're looking good. Thanks everyone, that was really interesting. Who have I missed? Where's Hely? There he is. Thanks everybody. That was really good and really insightful. And what I came away thinking was there's just a lot of interesting stuff happening across the country, and you guys are exploring, being challenged by, experimenting with all manner of things that are completely relevant to what we're thinking about in other parts of the country. And so it's great to hear your perspectives that we can learn from as much as you might learn from some of the things being talked about out of some of the big cities and the other companies that are going on. And so what we're going to do, actually, before I go, what I might show you Look at the crowds in Wellington there. I can see a few people with their phones, not really concentrating, but there's some good. They're probably 20 seconds delayed. They probably can't hear me yet, but they are being streamed to the world right now. I know there were science waves that kick in. And so I want to do a big shout out to, we're seeing Wellington down here at the moment at the bottom of the screen. And so Wellington have been sponsored by Trade Me today. So a big thank you to Trade Me for sponsoring the pizza and drinks and for the space that they're going to be using. So that's a good turnout for a purely online talk. And I'm going to bring Auckland into the stream, and they do tell me that some people had left a little bit early. So there are, I don't know how many more people in Wellington than Auckland, but Wellington's doing some good work here to represent. And so thank you for the people in Auckland who showed up, and thank you to Grid Auckland. I don't know if you say Grid Auckland or Grid AKL. I don't know that place, but they have created a space for the people in Auckland. And I believe Serco have been sponsoring the drinks and pizza or whatever you're drinking. So thank you, Auckland, for showing up and participating in person. We appreciate you. So we're gonna remove the embarrassment of the empty seats of Auckland, and we're just gonna revel in Wellington's abundance. And we're gonna kick into a little bit of Q&A. And the first question is, I'm gonna start from the end and I'm gonna come through. So we've got some really good questions from people about Kevin's talk. So Kevin, I think you can see that question in there. So there's this concept of, when is a company really become a product company? So when you walk in and they're not really doing things in a product way, how do you know they're ready for it and have an appetite for it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, certainly from the experiences I've had, certainly the most recent one, they were at a stage. I think it's a little bit similar to what Tim's describing. They're at a stage where you've made some progress, but in order I think you used the phrase that need to grow up a bit. Once you want to scale to the part that your ambitions lead to, that's kind of when you want someone to go, okay, well, what does good look like? How do we get from this process where there's 3 people around a desk talking to what does it look like when there's 30 people and 300 people? And I think that's when you start to realize that you need to put people in place that can build a process that builds that recurring value creating machine type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of questions. I don't need to necessarily bring them all up here around the concept of a product council. Can you dig into a little bit more about who would be part of a product council? Explore a little bit more around what you think they're going to be useful for and in what situations. Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, it's really, depend on what aspects, what exists within your business. So, for example, in my current one, there's all the usual parts like marketing and customer support, but we've also got I think, as I can't remember who mentioned, subject matter experts that are accountants, right? Someone was talking about having subject matter experts in a legal space, so they're obviously part of the product council, and really it's a representation of each area, so that we've got that joined up communication. What's important? What things do we not? As I mentioned in the thing, the first port of call is like, this is a place where everyone can go to try and get an answer on something, and then you can start to communicate your processes back across that business so that they flow into all the areas, because all the areas are key, right? So yeah, it's really a representation of all the areas of the business that exist.
Yeah, awesome. Obviously, Susie's talk was well received. So Susie, you had a dope talk, so that's nice. There were also some questions as well as compliments. So someone, I don't know who asked this question, but this idea that yes, product people might need to learn a bit of products, dev speak. How much of that goes the other way around? Do devs also need to learn product speak?
Yeah, I think the ideal case is you speak all of each other's languages, and it makes communication so much easier. But there are very few ideal cases. I think, like I said, I think as a PM, your role is to make sure the product gets delivered, your work, the dev and the team is working well. So I will put the onus on you. I think as a dev, I think learning product speak and learning business will be really helpful. And I think that also depends on the dev. Some people just really don't care and just really want their stories. And some people really want to know what they're doing and the context they're doing. So it's actually really knowing your team and what's useful for them. But I've also spent sessions I was working with AI data scientists where I was learning linear algebra with them and they were learning what like business meant. So I think there's a lot of really good collaboration. But I do think the onus is on you because you are, at the end of the day, in charge of making sure the product is built and you deliver great products. So you need to do whatever it takes. And it would be great if your team wants to like learn as well, but it's not an expectation.
Yeah, wicked. Jess, you talked about ruthless prioritization and feeling part of the team now that you've experienced something that we all feel. Can you give us some examples of when you thought you were being ruthless?
I guess I can't give you like concrete stuff off the top of my head, but I can define what I mean by ruthless. And I think like if you understand what you're wanting to achieve, then you kind of instinctively know what's in and what's out when you're going through it. And so rather debating it left, right, and center, we just make quick calls on things like, yeah, that's in, no, that's out. And I think with the case I talked about like parameters of what benefits the customer best. Well, the more people it benefits, the more likely it's going to be in, right? With cases like that. So it's just common sense, you know, to most of it, in my opinion.
Yes, we all love a good opinion here. Hely, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going through all of you. I'm picking out a good chunky question for each of you. And this is actually my question masked by Mind Products. But I wanted to explore a little bit by, when you're talking about MVP and you're suggesting investing more in a more complete solution that takes into account the experience as well as the functionality. Something has to give, right? There's typically something that's constrained. Maybe it's time, maybe it's resourcing. What are you negotiating with to give yourself more time to work on more parts of the solution?
Okay, so I think when you try to understand the scope a bit deeper and you get some potential possibilities to negotiate the scope, and yes, essentially one thing needs to go away. So when you negotiate your scope, maybe you can craft better solutions. So you make something smaller, but you know what you're building provides great deliver customer value, great customer value.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a classic, is it a triangle or a square? I did some research and there was a triangle between, what is it, time, cost, quality? Is that the classic agile triangle? Yeah, right. And then some smartass created a square and added another dimension that I'm going to forget. But I think there's these tensions, right? And you can't have everything. There's a temptation to go, well, I want it to be perfect. I want it to be amazing and fully functional and, the highest quality you can ever have. And I want it next week. And that's just not a reality in most businesses. There's normally some constraint that's more fixed than others. And that's what you have to play against, I guess.
Yeah. So normally you're going to need to drop something. And if you can make something a bit smaller, but ensure that the solution you're providing is the good one, is the adequate one. So you can build more from there. Yeah,
absolutely. And my final question for Tim, you're gonna like this one, Tim. You are so chill. So deep respect from you from I think Anthony. Yes, this is from Anthony. So you had a long stealth mode where you were working with either no customers or a small group of customers before you really started to scale. Can you talk about that strategy a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it was like I kind of cheated in respect is that sort of during that time, I think I was still working. I had a day job, so it was a side hustle. Sam, my business partner, was sort of in it full time. We had one or two engineers working for us. He had exited a previous company, so we could afford to wait it out. And I think it was just that, we just passionately and deeply believed that this product needed to exist in the world. And I think it was just that belief. We were always kicking goals. We were just sort of incrementally bringing people along on the journey with us, whether it was investors or people who had spent time in the in-house space or potential customers. So there was just enthusiasm that kept us going, and we never felt like we were it was a good waste of time or we weren't on the right track. And we knew that there was a huge prize at the end of it for us if we wanted to stick with it.
And you were playing the MVP game, right? You were going, well, this isn't good enough yet. This is not minimally viable yet to go big time, right?
Yeah. We were. In some respects, we were. In other respects, we were just building the whole thing and just sort of, hoping that people would come and use it at some point. So, yeah, I mean, we went sort of really, really wide and inches deep, I think. And then we started testing the depth that we needed to go to in the various modules and those various features and in terms of the various pain points that we're trying to solve. And then we'll double down and we'll go for it there. So, yeah.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm gonna finish with a comment from that wasn't the comment I wanted to burn. Yeah, this was the comment. So from Tracy is going right in. They're going, there is no triangle. Quality drive, speed drive, scope. I love it, and I think it could be a whole talk in its own right. So Tracy, wherever you are in New Zealand, I'm going to call you and find out more about your thoughts on the triangle, and convince you to do a future meetup on that very topic. Hey, a big thank you to you all for being part of what is a first for us, actually, like a regional group hug sit-in. And so thank you very much for taking part and sharing some of your ideas and letting the rest of New Zealand know what's happening out there. It was really informative, and you guys all kept time. I didn't have to chase it. We're 1:20 in, so for the 31 people who have stuck with the stream at home while baking dinner, I hope you haven't burnt anything. I hope it's still good, and thank you very much for joining us. The link that you hit up on this live stream will be available for the recording, so if you want to share it out to anyone, then you can share that same link. So thank you, everybody. Thanks you for Wellington and Auckland for being part of it. You guys rock for turning up on a terrible night. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, folks. Thanks everyone.
Everybody.
Thank
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.